Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for May 16th through 22nd. This week I read 4 books, I watched 4 shows, and I listened to 2 books. First this week from the Life's Library I read How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia. This is an interesting format of a book as it's written like it's a self-help book and it's written in second person. So you're going through these different sections of what you can do to become filthy rich in Rising Asia, but it's also a story about this man who is unnamed because it is you, and him going through life and falling in love with this pretty woman and eventually getting married and what happens to his family and all of these different things. Although I enjoyed it overall, I found myself kind of spacing out at points and having to go back and check what I had just apparently read because I was definitely thinking about completely different things while trying to read it. This book basically went through your entire life chronicling the success that you found through business endeavors and having to make bribes and all of these types of things. It also takes place in a city and villages that are unnamed as well. From there I imagine it's much easier for people from that area to picture exactly what city it is based on the cities that they know and the small villages that they know. Next I read The Cousins by Karen and McManus. The perspective of this one is 3 different cousins who are called to this island resort where their grandmother, who they've never met before, has said, hey, come spend the summer and work at my resort. Initially all of them are kind of like, but why would we do that? We've never met our grandma because she disinherited all of our parents 24 years ago. But of course the parents push them to go because they don't know why they were disinherited and they would love to get back in grandma's good graces. From there we get a ton of twists and turns, enough that some people will read this and be like, this is not realistic whatsoever. However, I don't go into it for that. I go into it for the tiny little clues that you're meant to follow and figure this out for yourself ahead of time. I went into this looking for a fun time and an interesting mystery, and that's exactly what I got. Next we have The Backstagers and the final Blackout. This is the 3rd and most recent book in the companion series to the graphic novel series that started it all. In this one, it's graduation time, so there's actually an exam week, which means the Backstagers have a week off. However, certain things happen that make that week full of adventures, but I can't exactly tell you how that happens because it's definitely a spoiler because this is a 3rd book in a series. There were some really fun aspects of this one, especially performance aspects that I really appreciated. There were a lot more shows name dropped, and in this universe all of the shows are very similarly titled to shows from our world, so it's fun to kind of figure out which ones they are. There was a take on Thoroughly Modern Millie that was like something to do with like Current Times Billy or something like that, which I thought was really funny. There was also a name drop of something similar to Joseph the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, but it was obviously a different title that was just very similar to that. And it was fun because occasionally there would be lyrics on the page, but if you knew the song that they were talking about, you could read those lyrics in that song cadence, and that was a joy. I have this weird feeling that this is going to be the last of the books, and I don't want to look it up because if another book comes out, I want to be surprised and joyous about it because I would love to keep reading about these characters going on these fantastic theater adventures. Yesterday I also finished Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith. This is a series of poems about being black and being queer and the intersections of those two things, as well as other experiences that the author has had. Content warnings for instances of violence, talking about sex, as well as HIV. I feel a little bit like a broken record in that I always point out that poetry isn't really my thing, but I can appreciate it at a very surface level, and that's what I do with the poetry collections that I see recommended over and over and over again. Sometimes I'm able to understand the meaning and intention behind a poem, and sometimes it gets a little bit lost on me, and that's a me problem. And not only is it a me problem, it's a me problem that's spread across most poetry. However, there were definitely lines and phrases in this poetry collection that were very impactful, so the hype that it is receiving is well deserved. On to what I watched this week. The first thing I watched this week was because I realized after I'd filmed my video that I forgot to watch it last week, and that was Drag Race Down Under. Subsequently, I also forgot to catch up on the episode for this week, so I'll be watching that after doing this video as well, and hopefully I will catch up this week. Anyway, this was the 3rd episode in the series, and in this one they were split into 2 groups and they did different versions of the same girl group song, and I actually woke up with that song in my head, which is how I remembered that I forgot to watch Drag Race yesterday. I also watched a couple of episodes from a documentary series called Global Food. The first one was on sushi and the second one was on pizza, and you have to bet that I had both of those things to eat last week immediately following those episodes. Actually, in case of the pizza episode, we definitely watched it and ate the pizza at the same time, but with sushi we went out and grabbed sushi and came home afterwards. This is produced by a company out of France, and I'm pretty sure that the other 4 episodes are also going to make me hungry and want certain food. foods. Then of course we also watched Bones and Malcolm in the Middle. We got to the point in Bones that I've been dreading, which is a major character getting injured. So we've just gotten to that point. We haven't even seen his reactions to it because it was kind of the cliffhanger end of the episode type of thing. And I'm looking forward to seeing how his relationships are impacted by this and any resolution, because I don't really remember how he is by the end of the series, which is quickly approaching because the 11th season is a full season and the 12th season is a half season and then it's over. We also watch more Malcolm in the Middle. We're most of the way through the 6th season. It's not going to be long before we are done this series, as long as we continue to remember to watch it. All I can really say about this series is it is intriguing how many shenanigans that they can think of to happen in the show. I did enjoy one episode where Lois was trying to make a point of something being racially insensitive to Malcolm at work and then try to drag in Hal's friends, the majority of whom are black, into the conversation, and how these men were basically just like, we're not here to solve your racial discussions with your children, Lois. Like, what? Why? The first book I listened to this week was We Ride Upon Sticks. This one is set in the 1980s, takes place in a town called Danez, and follows a field hockey team that kind of turns into a coven. They're off at this field hockey summer camp, and one of them in the previous school year had found this book in the library which basically had some idea of how you could harness some power, and they did that, and then they started basically winning every game and doing super well. So everybody signed their names in this book and got this piece of tube sock tied to their arm, and then would refill the power by doing certain evil deeds. And this was the story of that. And because a field hockey team has so many people on it, we got to know each of these characters really well. But for me, I was just constantly wondering what was going to happen with all of these supernatural type of things. And then when you get to the end, it jumps forward to when they're all adults and you kind of check in with their lives afterwards, and you're left with a lot of questions, which I kind of appreciated. But at the same time, I felt like this was pitched more as a stereotypical witch story and not like an actual modern witch story, so I don't know if I just got my wires crossed. I enjoyed it. There were certain aspects of this that were really funny, in that there were certain characteristics of characters who were treated as though they were characters themselves. For example, one character, Jen, had this hair that she called the Claw, and it had its own personality and its own thought patterns, and you got to know what the Claw thought about things based on what it looked like. And then the other one was Le Splotch, which was a hickey-like thing that was on somebody's neck for a very long time, and it got its own personality as well, which I appreciated that. I thought that was pretty funny. The other book I listened to this week was From the Ashes by Jesse Thistle. This is a memoir about him growing up, realizing he's Métis, being homeless, and being addicted to drugs. Early life was pretty rocky for him and his brothers. His mom and dad split up, and his dad petitioned his mom to just take the kids for a while, and then he didn't treat them very well. His dad would often be away drinking or scoring drugs and leave them starving in the house, and then one day Protective Services found these children and shipped them off to live with their grandparents. Their grandfather also lost his father when he was about 5 years old, so he never really got a childhood, he likes to tell them, and he is super upset about how his son has fallen into a life of drugs, so he's basically disowned his son, and tells his grandsons that if they ever do drugs, the same will happen to them. Because therapy was not really a thing that people did in the 80s, especially not lower class people who didn't have the funds for it. These kids didn't get any therapy, they really could have benefited from it, and because of that, life just kind of spun out of control for Jesse in particular. Through this first-hand account where he's done a lot of personal development, you get a lot of ideas as to why he did these bad things when he was a kid, because there was this whole series of things that he did that were considered bad, but if anybody had looked behind why he did these things instead of just thinking he is bad, they might have had some compassion and some way to talk to him about it that would have been very beneficial for his development. That being said, the author also owns up to the things he did, because ultimately he made those decisions. It always feels weird to talk too long about a memoir and really describe what happened in it because it's somebody's life, but I highly suggest reading this book. It was excellent. It is also narrated by the author. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as the link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!